just a second. All right, so here we are with Olivia Yu, and Olivia is a Senior Communications Officer with the Ontario College of Teachers for a number of years, as you just mentioned to me. So maybe we can start off, Olivia, just talking about the relationship between the Ontario College of Teachers and the Ontario government. I understand, I'll call it OCT here on in. It was created by the Ontario College of Teachers Act 1996. Is there any reporting relationship between OCT and the government?
I'm going to start off with a no. We are
Okay.
independent of the government. I'm going to dial it back a little bit because I mentioned it earlier. Regulation is a bit of its own industry.
Mm-hmm.
So all self-regulating bodies in Ontario exist because of provincial legislation. So think the College of Physicians and Surgeons, professional engineers, nurses, College of Early Childhood Educators. So we are all a part of different pieces of legislation that brought us into being. We're the largest regulator in Canada with more than 234,000 members. So those are Ontario certified teachers.
Mm-hmm.
As background, and I'm going to meander a bit because it does require context, only teachers who are certified by us can teach in Ontario's publicly funded elementary and secondary schools. So similar, you can only go to a doctor who's been licensed and has maintained their license. Same thing with nurses. In terms of a relationship, I would say that we have a collaborative one, and that's no different from education as a whole. There are so many different players within education, and everybody has a different responsibility. So the government is responsible for curriculum and for things such as, for ensuring that there is a body as us, which is us, to regulate and protect the public interest. So we are independent of them, but we exist because of them, because this is not a responsibility of the government. So they felt that they needed somebody that was solely dedicated, an organization that was solely dedicated to looking out for the public interest. Mm-hmm. Unions exist because they're there to advocate for teachers. We exist to advocate on behalf of the public. So the public in this case, students, right? The more than 2 million students attending Ontario's elementary and secondary schools. In terms of what that collaborative relationship looks like, our powers and our authority exists, the ability to do things because of the government. So a lot of times it's, when we're working through whatever process it is and doing our work, we look at, well, how can we strengthen student protection? Okay, well, we need such and such a law in place. So therefore, we would go to the government, we would make a recommendation, government listens, they take that, and then it begins the process of, introducing that as a bill, going through the multiple readings, and then at some point, hopefully, that bill becomes law for us. So it's very much I would say, collaborative relationship, but, the college collaborates with many other stakeholders as well, because you need to do it. It's the entire ecosystem.
Yeah, and you have a very clear mandate, and that's spelled out on your website. Can we talk about some of those 11 objects that you focus on and why they're important?
Definitely. So the objects that you see within the college all support one thing, which is, again, protecting the students. You'll see that most regulators have the same mandate in terms of the public interest. So, all 11 objects outline the responsibilities to protect and support student safety and well-being through regulation. So if you take those 11 things, you can distill it down to 4 things. It's issuing, suspending, and revoking teaching certificates, setting ethical standards and standards of practice, investigating and hearing concerns and complaints about Ontario certified teachers, and also accrediting teacher education programs and courses. So thinking about initial teacher education, so when you go to teachers college, and then of course the ongoing education as teachers are in field and through their careers.
Okay. Now, we see OCT mentioned in the media on a reasonably regular basis, especially with respect, of course, to disciplining teachers, a very important role. What are some of the communications challenges in dealing with the media, with public, with stakeholders?
I think that, well, media requests that you mentioned earlier are the ones that we get most frequently because they have a direct impact on the community. You know, teacher X does this, and the impact is usually on the youngest and most vulnerable members of our community, kids, right? So a lot of the times when we get requests like this, we will get asked to do one of the following, right? Can you confirm that an investigation is taking place? Can you sort of speculate on a possible outcome of a hearing? Can you comment on a disciplinary decision if it's already gone through the hearing process? Right? The short answer to that is no. And we cannot do that because of privacy laws, right? We can't comment. We cannot influence the outcome because every member is entitled by law to a just and fair hearing, right? We cannot speak to the decision. The decision speaks to itself. So, you know, when we get those questions, and we get those questions a lot, we have to work around them, right? So, you know, the creativity sometimes is, while we can't provide anything specific, we can speak generally about things. So, for example, somebody asks about the possible outcome of a specific case, we'll say that while we can't comment on specific cases, we can provide a list of possible outcomes to the media as a reference. So you find ways to work around that, and then you know, journalists are savvy. They can, you know, for the most part, piece everything together. And that's what really it is. You're trying to provide answers when you can't provide answers.
Right, and you make that very clear, obviously.
Yeah.
So maybe we could talk a bit about your communications department and how it's structured.
Sure thing. So I would say in terms of communications, we've got the senior communications officers, and there are three of us who sort of support the rest of the college. I would say 99% of everything goes through us, and we're the hub. We also work very closely. A part of the communications team are the graphic design folks, right? Studio, right? So that ensures a cohesive voice. From there, we've got translation, because education is English and French. We've got, so that means that 99% of the communication that goes out in English has to go in French. And so then we've got a social media team. My colleague, who also went to school under your tutelage for corporate communications, is leading the social media group, the digital communications team. And one of the things that we do that's critical for the team is our ability to work together, because communications needs to be cohesive. So maintaining communications on a very regular basis, either through informal meetings or coffee chat. Like when you are able to connect the dots, it helps to strengthen the communication for the organization. So as a whole, I would say that our team works very cohesively, very collaboratively. I mean, we like each other a lot, which helps make, you know, some of the issues that are thrown at you on a day-to-day a lot easier to work through. Great team to be a part of, for sure.
Yeah. Now, maybe we just talk about areas of communication that might be becoming, getting a little busier than others. I'm thinking of social media, which is obvious, but can you expand on how the communications function has changed over the past several years?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, social media has definitely become busier. I mean, when I was a youngin' and, you know, going to school with you, I think Twitter was but a pipe dream at some point. Now it's, you know, it's the end all or the be all, right? So social media is interesting because you look at, is it a news aggregate? Yeah. Is it a place where people go and, you know, share their beef with whatever organization they have or whatever the flavor of the day is? Yes. Is it the place where you get celebrity news? Is it the place where you connect with people? It's all of the above. So it's this very complicated beast, and you know, no organization is immune to social media. You're a part of the conversation whether you like it or not, and it is truly a conversation with its own life, breath, and it can evolve in an instant and just change in an instant. And I would suspect that most organizations have the same challenges. For a lot of public-facing organizations, it's morphed into a type of customer service system. You have a complaint about Rogers. I had a concern last week. I couldn't get anybody on the phone. I go through the social media. I got a response like that, and it was great. I think people have generally learned that it's faster to get a response via social than it is through other methods of communication. And that's just the nature of the beast. And I think that has spilled over in other areas. I mean, in general, communications has become much faster. I remember, an agency as a communications coordinator getting my media coverage by fax, and that was the premium service. You paid big dollars to get that premium service. Otherwise, you'd have to wait a week or two to get clippings in the mail. And now it's go, 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 go in most aspects. In terms of the communications function changing, there's more cohesion or sort of a blending, a blurring between communications and marketing. It used to be marketing was over here, they do this, and communications is over here. We're the thinkers, and these are sort of the more, artsy creative folks. And that's not the case anymore. There's more of a blurring. And I find that, there's now more, it's more encompassing, all these different areas, and there is greater alignment between what was previously very separate roles. I think that generally speaking, organizations understand that communications can help to mitigate risk and manage issues before they even come up. Yeah. So I think communications is now playing a much bigger role, especially when it comes to providing counsel to senior leadership or to other areas of the organization, because you're able to sort of spot the issues before they arise, because communications folks are typically the ones in the hot seat when there's an issue. So, if you pull us back, we're sort of the, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? And there is value in that. And I think organizations are seeing that value.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on this idea of issues and crises, perhaps. Maybe do you have an example or two of an issue or a crisis that took a lot of energy and focus on the part of the your communications department to manage it?
Sure. I wouldn't call it a crisis or an issue, but more of an ongoing project. And this particular one, I wanted to say officially kicked off in April of 2018 and is still kind of, I would say, sort of fully transitioned over and was wrapped up in February of this year. So going back to the different roles of different education stakeholders for a second, unions exist to advocate on behalf of teachers, right? The college exists to protect the public interest. Sometimes the roles butt heads with each other. To go back, the college has a college council, a governing board, if you will. So, a few years ago, our council consisted of, a year and a half ago, 37 members, right? 23 are members of the college, so Ontario certified teachers, while the other 14 were publicly appointed. We exist to protect the public interest, but, when you've got a council that's sort of heavily weighted for the profession, there is an inherent conflict of interest there. And many of the folks that were through an election model came in because, they held a role on union and they wanted to have a greater say, greater teacher voice, right? So the union voice had a greater voice than the public voice, right? Which doesn't necessarily make sense when it comes to an organization that exists to protect students, the public, right? Also imagine trying to get 37 people in the room to make decisions quickly. Not always the easiest case. So, and our council at the time, to their credit, understood that there were challenges in terms of efficiency, in terms of getting the job done in a way that could be that could move much more quickly. So in 2018, council approved our recommendation, this operational recommendation, to hire a firm to do an independent review of governance to see if there were any improvements that could be made in terms of process, in terms of personnel. Nothing was sacred and no stone was left unturned. Well, that report yielded numerous recommendations, including reducing council size from 37 to 12, equally balanced between members of the public and those within the teaching profession. So, here it is that council is digesting this, lengthy report going, okay, we've looked into this and there are numerous things. We haven't been doing things to sort of the most efficient way. What do we move forward with? So working closely with council, we picked the most important recommendations to make to the provincial government, convincing the government to enact these changes, put these into legislation, and then putting the regulations, sort of the details, into place so that we could figure out how this could happen, right? How can we transition to a new governance model? Right as of today, as of February 1st this year, we have a council in place, 12 members, equally balanced between members of the public and members of the profession, right? Much more efficient. But it took literally 3 years of consistent and ongoing work, moving from something that was very near and dear and had been in existence for more than 20 years to those who are in the profession, this election-based model, which we went through every few years, to one that was competency-based. So, ensuring that the right folks with the right qualifications. So it couldn't be just anybody who could win based on, the number of votes they got, but are you actually qualified? Do you have an education background? Do you know what regulation is, right? We wanted people who were qualified, knowledgeable, who would be making decisions for us, who could actually give us the guidance that we needed. We needed, again, council that was balanced, so that, both members of the college of teaching profession and the public could be balanced, those interests could be balanced, and that a smaller council would be able to just be more nimble and make decisions more quickly. From a communications perspective, that was challenging. We had to convince the government this was the way to go. We had to communicate these changes publicly, and as you can imagine, there were some concerns from, advocate groups who were saying, hey, why are you changing this? It's been working. Well, it hasn't been working, right? We had to alert our membership of these changes. We had to continually, keep the ball rolling, because the government has so many different concerns and things that they have to look after, that if you're not continually asking for these changes and pushing for these changes, they get lost by the wayside. Ensuring our stakeholders were in the know every step of the way, and then figure out a way to implement these changes as the laws and supporting regulations were literally being drafted, right? We knew we had to put them in place by such and such a date, but we didn't have the details or the power to go and figure out how it was. So it was a little bit like, reading the tea leaves to see how it could unfold, because we had to put everything in place by a set date. Right. And then so you take that and then you throw into there other changes and other priorities from the government, things like addressing a teacher shortage, making sure that there were enough teachers in the room, expanding the certification to additional cohorts who could qualify to help address the teacher shortage, introducing new requirements for certification and all those other wonderful things, and, throw in a little bit of COVID-19, and it's been sort of a wild 3 years for us.
Yeah, that's something. So that was a big challenge, and as you say, it took 3 years, but you came out with a good and effective model. On a lighter note, I wanted to get an idea. What are the best parts of your job? What do you really love about it?
What do I love about it? And I talked earlier anecdotally, it's doing something that matters. I mean, we've all heard the saying, it's PR and not ER. I don't know if that's still a saying that goes around. It was certainly sort of a common thing when I was, going through the phases of cutting my teeth. Which, when you're selling a product, it's lots of fun. Been there, done that, had a blast. But in my current role, I actually have the ability to, influence and change the lives of students for the better, albeit in a roundabout and indirect way, right? Being a part of student protection and teacher education, of knowing what the the college has the ability to remove those that don't deserve to teach from classroom, or to, ensuring members are provided with the knowledge that they need to help students, right? You can sort of spot the trends in an evolving classroom and think, okay, well, what can we do to help teachers navigate this new thing that's happening?
Yeah.
That's a big deal for me, especially after becoming a parent. So is that fun? I think it's sort of gratifying might be the better word. I think what makes it fun is, the people that you work with, right? Mm-hmm. Having great colleagues, having people you can talk to, and just establishing that relationship and not taking each other too seriously while dealing with, things that can be quite serious.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just wanted to thank you very much. I don't have any other questions. I was going to ask you about how you see communications in an organization like OCT changing in future. Do you see some changes down the road?
I think that not just for the college in general, but I would say across communications with most organizations is a greater reliance on communications. Again, I spoke earlier about this, is we're getting called in to consult on a variety of other subjects and also by areas that, in previous years didn't always feel they needed our help, right? Again, as communicators, we have the privilege of getting asked the difficult questions and being on the hook for answering them. And it's our role to help organizations connect the dots, right? We're the translators between whatever industry or organization we're a part of and the public, right? Like, we have to take these concepts and explain them in plain and simple language to the average person, right? We have to become experts first, and then often in many different areas. So this knowledge, if we choose to do so, enables us to look at the bigger picture and to see and to look at things from within the organization that most other functions do not have the opportunity to look at, right? Our job is to literally use accessible language, oftentimes to fill in the holes or the gaps of a product or a program, or to explain something that's really complicated. But again, you can only do so much with words, right? If communicators, and as we increasingly do more of this, can get in on the ground level, of anything, operations, the beginning of policy development, before anything that goes off that ground, we can increasingly help to bridge those gaps or point out the risks before something even, hits the approval stage or the conveyor belt or whatever analogy you want to use. And that's what's happening that I'm seeing. And so as a whole, I see professionals having a bigger role at the strategic planning table and also operationally in terms of, let's mitigate these risks before they even become risks. Like we are becoming more important in terms of becoming not just comms council, but council in general.
Absolutely. It's that subject matter expertise, the knowledge being brought in at the front end of discussion on policy, other issues, and being able to help. And I love that the phrase you use in terms of being a translator for information that then goes out to the public, being able to take that big step back and be an objective third party and say, hey, this is how the public is seeing us. This is what we need to think about when we're communicating with our public. So wonderful. Well, Olivia, I don't have any other questions, but I want to say thank you so much. Really appreciate having a chance to speak with you. And I know my students will certainly appreciate it too. So thank you.
I appreciate the opportunity. I mean, one of the things that I think I got from you when I was your student is, pay it forward, pass it on. So, every opportunity, and my career has very much been based on that. With many of the opportunities I've had, it's been to, pass on the knowledge, meet people for coffee dates. Don't be afraid to ask. Communicators are a friendly bunch. Reach out via LinkedIn. Cold call someone. If you can, mentor someone either formally or informally. And I really appreciate you passing that on, because I know that even after we graduated, you reached out to us and we were able to keep in touch, at least, for the first little while we were, as a group, getting our noses wet. getting our feet wet into this great big,
Yeah.
career, and just having that support is integral, especially when you're starting out. So I just want to thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, no, thank you. No, I'm very pleased to see all of the great success that you've had. So kudos, and thank you very much for being part of the discussion today. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, John. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you again.